I've observed some people would have this sense of shame that associates with their Chinese identity.
I mean, even if you grow up in China, some people hate their Chinese. Like, a lot of people wish they were in Europe, like they wish they were European.
When you said, like, I know people in China who, like, wish they grew up, or wish they were born in Europe or whatever, I was gonna ask if the wish is that they were white or that they just geographically grew up in Europe. But it sounds like, based on that, like it's not just the geography, it's also the race. I think it is such a weird feeling to feel like othered in two different directions. There are moments when I'm in a group of Asians and I'm like, oh, I'm too gay for this. And there are moments when I'm in a group of gays and I'm like, oh, I'm too Asian for this. It's hard to pinpoint exactly like what triggers those feelings in those like two separate scenarios. It feels like two very different like forms of pressure on me.
Interesting.
I talked about before like the spectrum of like being like the super minority versus like being in a school where like everyone else is Asian as well. I'm hoping my kid can be like grow up somewhere where it's a little bit more in between. So less in the middle of nowhere than where I grew up and did school.
To be honest, when I'm in high school, I have much more interest in Western culture. Watching all the English movies, I'm like trying to not like watch all the Chinese shows. Then when I came to the United States, then that actually puts like the I'm Chinese idea more into my head. How would like Chinese American react if China surpasses America?
I'm a fan of China, like, I'm sorry. So I went back to China for the first time since before COVID this year, and I feel like it's happening. Like China is progressing.
It's the moment,
Yeah, it is the moment. Like things have changed so much from just like 6 years ago. I feel like there is so much like innovation that is just a part of people's daily lives. Like even things like the convenience of all the different apps and like the WeChat integrations, like the transit and like the bikes and all those types of things. Like I think that there's already a lot of things that the US could probably learn from China, even though maybe from like a government or like policy perspective they don't want to admit it.
I don't know like how I would learn that had happened because of how China is portrayed in the West and specifically in the States.
Hi, I'm Tina. I'm born and raised in China until I was 15. Then I moved to New Jersey for high school. Then I did college in California, started working in there in San Francisco Bay Area. Then I came to New York 2 years ago.
So hi, my name is Howie. I was born and raised in China. I came to the United States for grad school. It was 2 years, and then I moved to SF for work for a year, and then I relocated to New York for work.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I was born in Beijing in China, and I lived there until I was 5, after which my family immigrated to the US, where we settled in Ohio. I spent most of my childhood and young adulthood in Ohio, and then I also went to California for college. I stayed there for a couple years afterwards, and similar to Tina, moved here about 2 years ago to New York City.
I'm Brian. I grew up in the States. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and then spent most of my time growing up in Seattle, Washington. I came down to LA in California for college with Tina and Jess. And I worked in LA for a couple of years and actually very recently just moved to New York.
You were born and raised here. Jess, you came when you were 5, and I came when I was 15. You came when you were 23.
Yes.
So, different faces. That's why I curated this crowd. So, I'm curious, when you grew up as a kid, at what point you realized you were Chinese?
I mean, I think I realized it like right away when I moved to America.
Right.
Because I moved here when I was about 5, and that's the age in America where you start kindergarten. Like, I didn't speak English when I first came here. I remember a lot of it was like I wouldn't really understand what the teacher was saying, so I was kind of just like doing my own thing in the background while she was like teaching like the alphabet or like whatever.
Yeah.
But I think I was always like very conscious of my Chineseness in the presence of everyone else who was American or mostly American. I feel like the public school system I was in Ohio, like there was some diversity. It wasn't like everyone was just like, you know, blonde hair, blue eyes, like white, like, but I would say like definitely the majority was white. Like I would say maybe 70 to 80%. And
maybe because of the fact that I grew up in the States, there was never like a moment of conscious realization where I was like, oh, I'm Chinese. My family moved to Portland, Oregon for like a couple years before Seattle. And that was around the time of, I want to say like kindergarten through second grade. I remember my parents also at that point had started putting me in Chinese school. I was, you know, learning how to read and write and all of those things. You know, I do all those like poems and learn the idioms and all that. But I still don't think it was a very conscious, like I never really thought about it. It never felt like it like never hit me in one moment. It wasn't until I went to college at UCLA where I was like, oh, I am Chinese and I'm actually like very actively interested in becoming closer to my culture. So I was fortunate enough to grow up with my grandma on my mom's side. She lived with us for most of the time that I was a kid, and she only speaks Chinese. So I spoke Chinese at home. Unfortunately, no reading or writing, or very limited, but speaking was there at least.
Because you mentioned Chinese school, I guess bilingualness is kind of natural. Yeah, like I never considered myself bilingual. I picked it up after I came for high school. And as we all know, the critical age for developing language skill is like around 13. Like I see English purely as my second language, and I don't really...
But even now, like today?
Yeah, I don't read in English. I know we have different ethnicities, but I've never really learned about like people are from very different cultural background within one country until I came to the States.
I think there are two sides of it. Just like so, like in China, apparently race is not like really a hot topic.
Yeah.
Like in general, like people really think about it because like most people are like all the same. So I think one thing that's nice about it is just like you don't have a race label. You're just like perceived more as a person.
So would you say the majority versus minority lens you only developed after you came to the States?
Yes.
Interesting.
To be honest, when I was in high school, I had much more interest in Western culture. Watching all the English movies, I'm like trying to not like watch all the Chinese shows. Then when I came to the United States, then that actually puts like the I'm Chinese idea more into my head. I was more into the idea of like immigrating into the US. I wanted to try to be Asian American and try to read more about Asian American experiences. But then later I just feel like I do not actually share that heritage.
I'm so curious, like what, if an example comes to mind, like what's an example of a part of the like Asian American identity that you realized like you didn't actually share?
Like my ancestor, I think part of like Asian American history, there's like a lot of like people actually went to build like the US railway.
Like history, ancestor.
I think like that part, I feel like that represents like certain Asian people that was like in that position at that time, but my ancestor did not go. Certain Asian people actually went through like suppression in this country, but then am I actually that part of that heritage? I'm not sure.
What would you label yourself?
I think that I am just definitely Asian American. Like I resonate very much with the Asian American experience. I mean, my ancestors are also like in China, right? Not that I don't have the historical context either, but I do think a lot of like the self-reflection, just kind of like how like Asian Americans perceive the world and move through it. I think a lot of in those more like day-to-day aspects, I find myself relating a lot more to that experience. I think it's just way too difficult to label myself as like either Chinese or American.
I would say similarly, I would just call myself like Asian American or Chinese American. My parents were first generation today, so I guess I hold a little bit of that history with me, but it does feel like one step removed for me.
A couple years ago, I learned a word called parachute generation. So there are a bunch of us who came here for high school, and a lot of them didn't come with their parents. They went straight to boarding school. They were dropped to this land when they were teenagers. So I feel like I kind of resonate with that group a bit more. Are there any moments that you felt disconnect or like you feel more connected with this identity?
Maybe this is like related to what you're talking about. I feel like for me, when I think of meeting other ABCs, other like Chinese Americans. When I was in high school, I did feel very connected to them because our backgrounds were so similar. I mean, even within like the Chinese American group, I mean, there's just so many differences. And if you think of it from a historical perspective, there are Chinese Americans today for whom their first generation in the States was a generation of Asians who like worked on the railroad. And then on the other end, there are Chinese Americans in the States who are like me, whose parents are the first generation in the States.
I have a juicy one.
You have a juicy one.
Do you know there's also legacy?
What's legacy?
Like, I've like this ex-coworker, she went to Stanford. Apparently, her grandpa also went to Stanford.
Oh, like they're building their legacy. I mean, there are some famous families that fled China during the political turmoil period, then carried they had generational wealth back in China, then they brought it here. But it's pretty rare.
So when you talk about like the Chinese American experience in America, on one side of the spectrum, you have someone like me who grew up in Ohio, somewhere that is predominantly white, where being Chinese is like the super minority. So your Chinese is really limited to like your family, like maybe some family friends. You have to really like assimilate into the, I guess, white American culture on a day-to-day basis when you're at school. When I was in college, it was my first time meeting a lot of Chinese American kids who they went to high schools with like 99% Asian. I just think that sort of experience growing up in the States must have enabled them to like, I don't know, develop a much different perspective of like their heritage and of sort of how they see themselves.
I've observed some people would have this sense of shame that associates with their Chinese identity.
I mean, even if you grow up in China, some people hate their Chinese. Like, a lot of people wish they were in Europe, like they wish they were European.
When you said like, I know people in China who like wish they were born in Europe or whatever, I was gonna ask if the wish is that they were white or that they just geographically grew up in Europe. But it sounds like, based on that, like it's not just the geography, it's also the race.
The majority of the world, like
the top of the hierarchy. I have an interesting take. Like I actually like obviously white supremacy is like valid, but I feel like I personally have never bought into this idea that like America is better, that like I should assimilate as much as possible to be American. Like I need to strive to be more American. Like actually I have always been like very proud of being Chinese and of China. You know, America to me was like Ohio, like this place that I grew up where I was a minority. There was like nothing. And then every summer I would like go back to China and I was in Beijing and I was with my like family friends and like there was so much like vibrancy. America doesn't realize like how nice China actually is.
It's super interesting here. I feel like, so similarly, I don't think I personally ever like felt ashamed of being Chinese. When people, or at least from the ABCs that I've seen, who like feel ashamed and wish they were white or whatever, it has less to do with like money and status, although I'm sure that's part of it. I think it has more to do with like not wanting to feel othered, wanting to feel like they belong in a society that is predominantly white.
Right, the sense of belonging really matters. Speaking of that, I wonder, when you travel, do you feel like your identity keeps as a constant, or do you feel like it could vary from time to time? Because when people ask me, where are you traveling from? Like, you know, this is a really hard question to answer. Like, the first time I had experienced this was when I studied abroad in Europe. Like, when I was in Paris, I was with a bunch of Californian girls. They would just naturally answer, oh yeah, they're from California. Like, I would just say, California. Yeah.
I think I would prepare my answer based on how judgmental the country might be, to my understanding. When I was in Japan, because I know like there's all this news about like how Japan secretly hate Chinese travelers. When people ask where I'm from, I'm like, oh, I'm from Europe. The intention of me answering this question is so that I don't get like being picky or being judged.
One thing I talk about with Jazz all the time is like dating standards and like beauty standards. You can just, from pictures, you can tell whether this is an ABC. Can you talk about some of the beauty standards that you feel that's stereotypically not prevalent?
Genetically, Asian American and Chinese usually like Chinese American are from South China. So they are looking more South Chinese.
It's like the Chinese standard is all like the pale, elegant, cute, like pure, like
childish.
And then for Chinese American, or like more American leaning, it would be like tan, like more like fierce or like sexy or hot,
confident.
Confident.
So I feel like it also has to do with the way that Asians are represented in Western media.
We've talked about how like Hollywood casts like Asian actors that are like very westernized. If you look online at like the Chinese netizen discourse, a lot of them don't find them like attractive.
Right.
Like, don't understand why like they would be the celebrities here because it's just so different.
That's
like,
true.
Standard.
Yeah, and you can't say like whatever is better. It's so subjective. Would you say like racially, do you have a preference?
Yes, I think also culturally.
Culturally and aesthetically.
I don't think I have a strong preference actually. When I am with like Asian guys, there is a greater sense of like there's a deeper part of you that I understand, and there's a deeper part of me that you understand. But I wouldn't say it like extends to the point of a preference.
I love that. I'm going to circle back to language. I realize that I really need my date to understand Chinese. I'm fully expressive when I'm speaking Chinese. And I don't even need the person to talk back to me in Chinese. I just need them to be able to understand what I'm communicating and the emotions. I wonder, do you ever feel that your Chinese or Chinese American identity intersect with your sexual identity?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think it is such a weird feeling to feel like othered in two different directions. There are moments when I'm in a group of Asians and I'm like, oh, I'm too gay for this. And there are moments when I'm in a group of gays and I'm like, oh, I'm too Asian for this. It's hard to pinpoint exactly like what triggers those feelings in those like two separate scenarios. It feels like two very different like forms of pressure on me.
Interesting. If you were to ask a question to someone, like four of us, like what are you most curious about, like regarding this broad theme topic, or something you want to share?
Yes. Where do you want to raise your kids?
To be honest, like as I told you, I think language to me is very important. At least I want to be able to raise my kids like to speak fluent Chinese. So I'm thinking about like at least primary school time back in China.
I do definitely want to raise my kids in America. I think I'm just so much more familiar with like the schooling system. I talked about before like the spectrum of like being like the super minority versus like being in a school where like everyone else is Asian as well. I'm hoping my kid can be like grow up somewhere where it's a little bit more in between. So less in the middle of nowhere than where I grew up and did school.
I think States is like the most likely option just because I'm so familiar with it, but I also like feel very strongly that I want my kid to grow up speaking Chinese.
How would like Chinese American react if China surpasses America?
I'm a fan of China. Like, I'm sorry. So I went back to China for the first time since before COVID this year, and I feel like it's happening. Like China is progressing.
It is the moment.
Yeah, it is the moment. Like things have changed so much from just like 6 years ago. I feel like there is so much like innovation that is just a part of people's daily lives. Like even things like the convenience of all the different apps and like the WeChat integrations, like the transit and like the bikes and all those types of things. Like I think that there's already a lot of things that the US could probably learn from China, even though maybe from like a government like policy perspective they don't want to admit it.
I don't know like how I would learn that had happened because of how China is portrayed in the West and specifically in the States.
Something you really dislike about a stereotype being a Chinese?
So my least favorite is that like Chinese people are very like rowdy and sort of like disorderly, especially when they're traveling in other countries. And this year when I was traveling in Japan, there were many times where I was in like more touristy areas and there's like big group, like Chinese tour group would just kind of like blow by and they would be like very kind of like disruptive, like they would speak like very loudly and kind of just like not be as I think mindful of their surroundings. So I do think that that's something I feel like I am part of the problem maybe sometimes when I'm like traveling with family and whatnot, but I do wish that we can change that sort of like perception.
I love it. To me, like we talked about it, like kind of like public space.
There's the personal distance. I think the culture of personal distance. In financial industry, I think being Asian kind of like disqualify you a little bit from leadership roles. Like you're not perceived that much.
Like less outspoken.
Yeah.
Like as like leader, and I feel like those kind of like projection actually does impact people in their decisions. hopefully.
I used to work in consulting, and there weren't a ton of like Asians in leadership positions. I feel that people would have described them as more like intense or like cutthroat or whatever than just like leaders or partners or whatever on average.
Thanks for a great
Thank you.
episode.